are there any submarine movies that are actually accurate? Like Hunt for Red October, Das Boot, like any submarine movies that are actually good?
No.
Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott Groves with the On the Edge podcast, and we're talking to my new friend, Max Herrera, who went from a nuke sub technician, and I never know whether it's nuclear or nuclear, or I can't say the word correctly, so that's fine, I'm a moron, a technician on a nuke sub to being a realtor, which has to be a totally normal career path. And in our attempt this year to talk to more business professionals, realtors, lenders, financial professionals, CPAs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I kind of put the word out on Facebook, and an old high school buddy of mine who was in the Navy with you, I believe, hit me up and he's like, man, you got to meet this guy, Max. He's super dynamic, great guy, worked on a nuke sub. I'll just say nuke sub so I don't have to pronounce the word. And now works in real estate investing, and he's a realtor, and he's just killing it out in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm like, oh, funny story. I got a buddy who's moved from Central California to Knoxville, Tennessee. He's flipping properties, so maybe something in common there. And I was like, yeah, I have to talk to a guy who was smart enough to work on reactors and chose real estate. So welcome to the show, Max. And other than the little bit I know about you from Instagram, wife, 2 kids, obviously Naval Academy background. What's your story, man? How did you grow up? Where'd you come from? How'd you join the Navy? And let's go from there.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on here. I'm very happy to be here. Background, way back, my dad is Venezuelan, so I have some Spanish side to me. My mom was born here in the States, and he truly lived the American dream where he got to come at the age of 17 here to Knoxville, Tennessee, went to the University of Tennessee on scholarship, and really start from nothing and really build it up. And so he's always had such a huge respect for the U.S. in general and the opportunities. And I kind of grew up just hearing his story and how much freedom he did have in his career. And he's a very successful engineer as far as, education and his specific field. But I kind of took that and I was like, man, that's so unique and such a cool opportunity to be in a country where you have these opportunities that you don't really get everywhere else. You can't really start, I don't have any experience, but the ability to just have that, there's no ceiling on your growth here. So I wanted to do my part in protecting that freedom. So I was really into engineering and math and science and everything. And somehow through soccer got turned on to the Naval Academy and had an older friend who went to the Naval Academy and then joined. So did that, got my engineering degree from the Naval Academy in electrical engineering, and joined submarines as a submarine officer, and did power school prototype, which is part of the training pipeline to get to be a submarine officer on some submarines, and did a few deployments, and really loved the mission, but not so much the life and not what I wanted to do long term for family. And there's a lot more details in there and everything. And so.
And how long did you serve?
So after the Naval Academy, I graduated in 2014 and I got out in 2022. So just a few years ago. So 8 years outside the Naval Academy.
And what I think a lot of people who weren't active duty military, thank you for the service, by the way. I was in the Army. I was an enlisted guy. And what I think a lot of people don't know about the military is that when you're an enlisted guy like me, you sign a contract, you're in for 4 years. They can do very little to keep you in after 4 years in one day. But when you're an officer, you serve at the pleasure of the military, right? Like you have to ask to leave.
Yes. And to be honest, that's kind of what happened to me was it was during COVID when I initially submitted my resignation, and it takes anywhere from 9 to 12 months. and the world was so uncertain that they kind of hit a temporary pause button on letting people even get out because they didn't really know what would happen. And it takes so long to train a submarine officer that they wanted to keep as many in as possible. And I mean, that's kind of what I was told, but long story short, yeah, it happened to me where they did let me out exactly when I wanted to get out. So I had to stay. It ended up being a little bit longer, but yeah, I was hoping to get out before the birth of my son, but I didn't. Luckily, I was here in Knoxville when he was born. I didn't miss it, but yeah, it's crazy. So you're exactly right.
So we're going to get back to you in a minute, but I want to go back to your father coming from Venezuela. How does a young man living in Venezuela, which obviously that country has not seen the best of times over the last decade or so, how does a young man from Venezuela end up at the University of Tennessee to become a volunteer? And I don't mean a volunteer in like the adjective. I mean, for those that aren't college football fans, the Tennessee football team is the Volunteers. That's your mascot. So how does a boy from Venezuela be like, yeah, Knoxville, Tennessee?
Yeah. So from the stories he tells, so he's the smartest man I've ever met. He back in I guess it was the 70s when he came here, Venezuela had a bunch of like oil money. Their economy was kind of booming and everything. And so they were making all these connections. And he actually came here as a part of like a lottery system for doing well in school and testing well. They sent him here and he signed up for the program to be an exchange student and was here when he was like 16 and fell in love. He just randomly matched with Knoxville. I think it was a little bit outside Knoxville, but he loved it. And the mountains, because he was in a very mountainous part of Venezuela. And so you can always see the mountains over here. And they just reminded him of Venezuela. So he got in a bunch of other places, I think 5 or 6 other places with great scholarships, but he turned down some better schools, honestly, for just the location of being here. And yeah.
That's amazing. And not to go into a full political lesson of Venezuela, but I'd love to hear somebody whose, father obviously is first generation from there. My limited understanding of Venezuela is basically they've got a ton of oil. Their economy is booming in the 70s and 80s. And then president after president just continues to win by promising more and more and more and more. And they basically, my understanding, is socialized themselves into bankrupting the country. Is that an accurate representation of what's gone on in Venezuela in, a 30-second Reader's Digest review?
Yeah. The only tidbit kind of gets more into politics and stuff, but it's very interesting, is that, the country actually took over all of the oil industry themselves. And so that's the socialized part of it, where they just like took all that resources and instead of it, being the best business owners running it, it was, corrupt politicians. And I use that term loosely because not everyone was obviously corrupt, but that's what happened is, there's tons of oil, tons of money, but it was getting funneled to the, certain people's pockets, essentially, and not to the people. And quality of life. And, once you get powerful politicians in, it's hard to get them out in a society like that. So, I don't know. I know it was so bad by the time that I was even born that my older brother was able to go when he was an infant, but my dad's never been back since I was born. And most of my dad's family was able to come here, live in the US now. But yeah, it's not a good place to be, I'd say.
I'm sorry to hear that, man, but I'm glad that most of your family was able to make it up here and, thoughts to the people that might still be stuck there. But anyway, coming back to you. So you were born and raised in Knoxville, felt called to service. What is it like when you say being an officer on a submarine? Like, what is the staffing on a modern day sub? I mean, I don't, that world is so foreign to me. You could literally tell me there's 12 people on the sub or there's 22,000 people on the sub. And I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, clearly, duh. What without giving away any top secret information, what does life on a sub look like? Like, what's the stuff that I could find out on a YouTube video without getting you in trouble with the Navy?
Yeah, so just structure itself, there's several different types of submarines. There's fast attack and boomers. It's kind of the simplest way to describe it. Fast attack or just your everyday submarine that's doing like top secret missions and going and doing really cool stuff. And then there's boomers, which is kind of slang term for the nuclear missile submarines. And those are just their mission is just as a nuclear deterrent. And they're just staying hidden basically all the time.
Is it? I've read somewhere that like those boomer submarines that are off the coast of somewhere as a nuclear deterrent. They have enough firepower on them to basically wipe out the United States, something like that. I mean, there's like just an insane amount of nuclear firepower on each of those ships.
It's absolutely insane, and I've spent several days or weeks on board boomers as part of my training, but I was deployed on fast attacks. But yeah, I don't know the exact quantity, and it kind of varies. But yeah, it would blow anyone's mind how much is on just one submarine.
And so on these fast attack subs, like what does the hierarchy look like? How many people do you have on there, like officers to enlisted guys? And like, what is life on a sub like?
Yeah, so you have, as far as officers and enlisted, there's anywhere from like 12 to 15 officers on board a fast attack submarine, depending on what type of mission you're doing. And then there's about 100 enlisted, upwards of 120 if you're on mission and need special people on board. But yeah, so it's about 120 people on board at any given time. And there's only like 100 beds. So the junior sailors have to, we call it hot rack, where when one person wakes up to go to work, another person's getting in. So you're getting into a hot rack or a hot bed. So the life on board a submarine is pretty brutal because there's only enough. So space is an issue and a concern for everything that you do is pretty much a limitation. There's only enough people to do the job and really no extra people. So what that means is if you're on a 6-month deployment, you're working 7 days a week. You have an 8-hour shift, which is where you're on watch, like watching the nuclear reactor or, watching sonar or giving commands for the submarine. But then the other 16 hours, you obviously have to eat and sleep, but you have all these other duties and responsibilities with sending messages or doing maintenance and all these trainings. It's just constant work, and you don't get a single day off because there's nobody else to do a double shift basically. So and that's not even,
if space is a concern, it's not like there's a weight room on the ship, right? Like you don't get to just like go to the gym and then go to a movie theater. Like I've seen some of this crazy shit on like battleships where it's like a real floating city and they've got movie theaters and gyms, and space is not a concern when you're on a floating city. But on a sub, it just like, do you just go crazy?
Yeah, that's actually, like, all joking aside, that is a huge issue with submarines is you have a lot of people. I don't want to say a lot. I mean, it's a very small fraction, but it's enough to make it sad, where you do have the occasional people who do get depressed and, commit suicide, which that's everywhere, but it is especially high in the submarine community. They do a bunch of screeners, like psychological screeners, but until you're away from home, there's no communication, and it also is a very stressful environment as far as like the technical aspect of it, with it being a nuclear reactor, and all the qualifications are extremely intense to be able to do the different stations, like stand watch over the different stations of the reactor, and even the front. So we call it the back half, which is the engineering, and then the front half is the all the war fighting and navigation part of the submarine.
Don't you have like Tesla auto drive where you can just leave the reactor alone for a few weeks and it'll be fine? Or is there like, do these things actually, like, are you monitoring for the oh shit moment, or do these things actually have like maintenance protocol?
Yeah. So basically, your goal on a submarine is just to stay operational. And for anything that's continuously running, just like your car, there's maintenance. Um, and so the goal for submarines is to do everything preventatively. So you're doing it on your own schedule so you can plan it. So you don't have anything unexpected arise. But what that means is you're always doing preventative maintenance.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it's just around the clock. You have all sorts of daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly maintenance items that you have to do. But Tesla should definitely get involved in the submarine community. That'd be pretty cool.
So just so that you don't have to tell us anything that, you know, might get you in trouble or classified, I'm just doing a quick Google search here of like U.S. attack sub depth. And it's like 650 feet, 800 feet. How deep can a U.S. nuclear sub crash? 3,000 feet. Like what? I don't understand how a tin can stays structurally sound at that pressure, because if people have never worked underwater before or taken a scuba diving class, like you can feel the pressure on your body and the difference in how quickly you breathe compressed air at 50 feet versus 100 feet. And underwater, 50 feet is nothing. Like you can look up at a boat that's 50 feet above you on the surface of the water and it feels like it's right there, like you could reach out and touch it. So when you're talking about like hundreds or thousands of feet, I mean, is there any fear, or do you just get over it? Like, do you ever like sit there and like kind of have a freak out moment that you're like, I'm in this floating tin can way farther below the surface of the water than any human has ever survived?
Yeah, I mean, if you really thought about it at all, you would just be paralyzed into fear, because it's like most of the beds are like along the hull or the outside of the submarine. And so you're inches away from that thousands of, pounds of pressure. So yeah, it is something that you think about every now and then. But it's also the amount of engineering and safety protocols that go into building a submarine are pretty insane. It's actually the same program that the space shuttles use. It's called the SubSafe program, and where every single like component that goes into keeping the sub safe is controlled from when it's being smelted and molded into an alloy to the welds, and everything is just monitored and obsessively controlled. And then on top of all that, you have a huge safety factor, which not a lot of other industries, because you don't have such high consequences if there's a failure, but you have a huge safety factor. So what that turns into is like, okay, this material is good for 10,000 pounds, but let's only ever get it up to 5,000 pounds or something like that. So you have a large margin for error.
Give people a science lesson, because I'm just Googling like what the normal like cruising depth of a U.S. submarine is, and they're like 300 meters, which is like 1,000 feet. Can you give somebody a science lesson? Like, again, anybody who's never like looked this stuff up or taken a scuba diving like class and understanding the compression on your lungs just at 50, 100, 200 feet, and when you have to start, breathing mixed gases because your lungs can't even process like normal CO2. Can you give people like a scale or a science lesson quickly of like, when you're at 1,000 feet, how much pressure is on the outside of that submarine, of that vehicle?
Yeah, so it gets really complicated, because the further down you go, everything starts to matter. And this is like probably way too in the weeds for what you're asking, but even the salinity of the water matters, because everything that affects the density affects how much pressure. So the temperature of the water, the salinity, and there's a few other things, but it all just goes into how much pressure. But as far as a specific number, I mean, it would really just depend on how deep you are. And I don't have those, like the equation memorized right now to give you a specific answer, but it is thousands of pounds, because it's the weight of, like, imagine a column of water, like a square inch of water, 1,000 feet up. That actually weighs quite a lot. So, and that's per square inch of pressure.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. So if you just took a square inch of water, like, basically what you can round off your thumb and your pointer finger to, and then you stacked 1,000 feet of that water on that 1 square inch, that would just slice right through your body.
Yeah. And then, you have that's just per square inch. And so you multiply that by, it's bigger than a football field, which most people don't realize how big submarines actually are. But even the small ones are as big as football fields, as long. So yeah, it's pretty insane.
I might have been one of the depressed, like suicidal people that would have to get off the ship. Cause like just talking about it, like my palms are kind of sweaty. I'm like, that's the worst work environment ever. Like you'll never get stressed out about a house closing like a day or two late. Cause you're like, dude, it's not like the house can implode. We're not 1,000 feet underwater. It's going to be okay. The house is not bleeding.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it's such an interesting life because when you're in it, and your family, they do a good job of like supporting the families and everything. So all your other friends are also in it because, that's deployments, but the workups, and there's just tons of time away, and it's just, it all adds up to be very brutal, and you don't realize what you're doing until you get out of it, and you're like, oh my word, like how do people do that?
Are you allowed to say what class of submarine that you were on?
Yeah, I was on a Los Angeles class.
Okay. How long can a Los Angeles class sub stay underwater? Let's just see what the public information is on this. 90 days? Yeah. What the fuck? Sorry.
Yep.
So like you don't see the sun for 90 days. You're stuck with 100 people for 90 days. You're eating the same processed food like in the Matrix for 90 days, just some slop out of like 90 days, man.
Guess what that 90 days is even based off of?
What?
If you had to guess, it's food. That's just pretty much the most amount of food because you make your own water, you make all the electricity, all the energy from the reactor.
There's got to be a desalinization thing on board. Yeah. So you just run out of food.
That's the only thing that limits you. And so you can like even push that 90 days in like certain circumstances. You can, go up, another 30 days or so just based on how much food you can bring on or how many people you have on board. But that's what they try to limit it to. And to answer the other part of that, the only people that, have that. Oh, sorry, that light just went off.
No worries.
The only people that have the ability to even see daylight is the person when you go to periscope depth on the periscope, and they're seeing it through either mirrors or cameras or whatever. So yeah, you don't see. There's no windows on the submarine. There's no even messages or.
Yeah, don't humans need like sunlight, like whatever that is, B12, B14, one of those things? Like, do you guys have like a tanning bed on there so you don't get sick?
No, it's like they try to keep the circadian rhythm, which is, the 8 hours of sleep and all that. But yeah, so there's like dark times and light times where the lights are on or versus when they're off. Because there's no sunlight when you're that deep or even on a submarine. So it's all artificial days and schedules, and you just go off, Zulu time, so you're not confused when you cross time zones and all that stuff. But,
yeah, dude, this life is not for me. Hey, this quick interruption is brought to you by me, Scott Groves, the host of the On the Edge podcast. This podcast is brought to you by me. I'm a loan officer who can help you with a mortgage in all 50 states across the United States. I also coach loan officers. So if you are a home buyer who's looking to get a mortgage, if you're a realtor who's looking to partner with an awesome loan officer, or if you're a loan officer looking for coaching, get in touch with me. It's those sources of revenue that allow us to produce this podcast and get out a new episode to you every week for the last couple of years. So if you're looking for a mortgage, if you're looking for a mortgage lender to partner with, or you're looking for a mortgage coach, I'm your guy. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. I think had I not joined the Army and I joined the Navy, it'd be super cool to be like on a boat, where you can see the ocean. That brings all types of other problems too. But like big floating city where you can see the sunshine and go work on the deck. And you screwed up, bro. You screwed up. You were too smart. Shouldn't have gotten that engineering degree.
Well, that's what happened is I really had no interest in going submarines. And then the summer before my senior year of college at the Naval Academy, they select a couple people and they send them to Pearl Harbor, to Hawaii. They kind of wine and dine you, and they're like, "Oh, this is the sub life." And then, yeah, sure enough, that's not at all what being on a submarine. So,
yeah, the recruiting is always different than the actual job, right?
Yeah.
So last question on your naval career, and then we'll move to like how you end up in real estate, because that just is bonkers to me that not a whole lot of electrical engineering going on in real estate. But when I signed up before my senior year of high school, and at the time they had this thing where they're like, hey, if you sign up before your senior year of high school and you show up for like 4 workouts or something, that counts as your first year. So you only have to do a 3-year enlisted contract instead of 4 years. Little did I know that choice would like radically change the course of my life. Had I gone 4 years, things would have gone totally different. But it was 3 years, and then when I was hit with like the possibility to re-enlist, I was thinking to myself, it's like, well, if I do one re-enlistment and I re-enlist for 6 years and I go to Ranger School and they give me a $50,000 bonus or whatever they were offering, it's like, well, now I got 9 years in. At 8 or 9 years in, you just might as well do the 20 and get the pension. So what was the thought process like for you, where you're like, man, I've got 4 years in the academy, I've got 8 years in. Officers make decent money. Like what was the decision to not say like, I can kind of ride this out for 12 more years and at least I got a pension and then I'll start my, post-military real life. What did that look like? Or what was the family decision, or what was the breaking point for you where you decided to get out?
Yeah, so there's actually several things. So first of all, the pull to stay for me was just the technical aspect of it, because it is very challenging. And so when you get good at it, it kind of like feels really good. And there's always the next step or the next level. Like in the military, they do a good job of like, here's your next goal. Like you got to qualify for this, or you go get this next rank by testing here. So there's always something to be working towards, which is really cool. But then, yeah, the mission and I got to do some really cool things that one day I'll be able to talk about. But yeah, that was just so rewarding. But the pull to leave was for me just so much stronger, because the family life was pretty much non-existent. And luckily I didn't have any kids, but all the chiefs or the older enlisted or older officers, they all, had pretty rough family lives, and, they're missing the births of their children, or, as they get older, they're missing all the like soccer games. And my parents were so supportive and involved in my life that I knew that like that wasn't an option for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then also my wife, she is a physician, and so she also has her own full career. And that's what made it easy at the beginning, is because we're both kind of focusing. We met each other in high school, so we've been together forever, but we both had our own very demanding careers that we focused on. And then once we kind of got through toward the end of our like pipelines and trainings, and when we got to live normal lives, is when kind of realized that, I wanted to be more present, and also more fulfilled in a accomplishment sense, because my biggest problem with the military in general is that especially in the submarine community, there's really no incentive for going above and beyond what you're required to do, because people who are less performers than you, or don't work as hard, barely show up for work, they're getting promoted before you just because they've been there longer.
Right.
And it's not because they're doing a better job. And that was frustrating for me, because I like to work hard and I like to be rewarded for doing that. So I just kind of didn't really match my philosophy as far as work goes long term either. I wanted to build something or put more energy into it. So
and out of the 8 years that you were in, how much time were you home?
So yeah, the first 2 years are all just training. So you're just in South Carolina, just training nonstop to get qualified. And then once you get to a submarine, it gets really complicated to even calculate that. But I would say 3 years of the 8 were really intense, and then the rest of the 5 were pretty slower paced. But those 3 years, I was probably gone well over half the time. And if I would have stayed in, it would have been like the next 3 years would have been the same as the hardest 3 years. So I got out right before it would have gotten more difficult. Basically, again, it cycles because you're attached to the submarine, and you do deployments and training, but then you do a shore tour where you're at a desk job, or you're doing supply or whatever to help the admin side of submarines. So
it's wild, man. My uncle who passed away a while back, he was on a like a radar sonar ship, like the little ship in the fleet that's like doing all the electronic shit. And yeah, it was like for years it would be 6 months on a shore, somewhere in San Francisco where he could actually see his family and see his kid and see his daughter grow up. And then it's like, all right, peace. I'm gone for 6 months. So yeah, Chris, I'm getting some type of weird feedback. So can you turn off whatever other mic it is?
It's not another mic. I think it's his computer.
Oh, okay.
You might need to turn his volume down a little bit.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you
in my computer, okay.
If you just turn maybe like the volume down a little bit or something, I don't know. I don't know what was picking it up,
because since it's delayed, that means it's coming from his end.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Okay,
I think we're
is that any better, or do I need to do something else?
No, I think we're good there. Yeah, and it might just be in my mic. I don't think it's affecting like the master recording, so we're good. And the cool thing is we have cameras here, so they'll get like the cool view of me, not the silly Zoom view where the balloons keep going up. I don't know. I guess I'm blowing smoke bubbles and the balloons keep coming up on Zoom. I don't know what the fuck is going on.
I was like, oh, it's a party.
All right, man. So you decide to get out of the military, and you're like, yeah, okay, I've got an amazing career in effectively management, which is what being an officer is. And then you've got this background in electric engineering, and you're clearly one of the smartest dudes at the Naval Academy if you ended up on a sub. And they're like, yeah, man, I should go sell some real estate. Because with like kind of a bullshit certification and almost no training, I can go help people with the biggest financial decision of their life. That is definitely where I want to grow my career. Like, how does that even happen?
Yeah, so that's kind of a funny one, because I even like, as I was basically being held my last few years in the Navy because of COVID, I was like, well, I'm going to set myself up even better. So I even got my master's in engineering management as well. So I have a useless master's degree. Yeah. So it even gets a little worse. But what really decided it for me was kind of the realization of being at a pivotal moment in my career of knowing that I wanted to do something that I could be my own. I was only limited by myself, basically. I can work as much or as little as I want and be rewarded for it. And really, once you get so trained in nuclear engineering and subs, there's a lot of career paths that you can go, but they're all pretty, working out of a nuclear reactor. There's one close by here in Tennessee, but that's not the lifestyle that I wanted to live. And I was kind of tired of being limited by others, hierarchy or structure or whatever. So I knew I wanted to kind of build something. And where the real estate came in was, number one, I'm a numbers guy, being an engineer, and obviously the numbers in real estate are kind of unlike anything else as far as like a personal level. Like you said, it's the largest transaction that people make. And two, the investing. I knew I wanted to grow something, and becoming a real estate agent was kind of my first step into kind of doing and investing. So I wanted kind of a quote unquote reliable day job income to get started into investing. And luckily, my wife's been great. She's super supportive. She has her own career that's made that jump a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's easier
into
when
the unknown.
It's easier when the wife's making physician money to like go into a fully commissioned entrepreneurial venture, right?
Yes, exactly. That kind of eased the burden on the infant that we had at the time. And
good job, wife.
Everything.
Good job.
Yeah, she's great. So it definitely helped. But I didn't want to be like a slave to the work cycle, to the work day, and I wanted to be able to use my time how I wanted to, because I knew what I was capable of doing, and how much work I'm willing to put in, basically.
And how did that get, how did the seed get planted for real estate? Was it a podcast? Did you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad like everybody else? Did you did you have parents or family or friends who made good property investments back in the day, and they're like, hey, all of a sudden one day I'm a millionaire because I just bought a property and held on to it for 30 years? Or what was it that planted the seed that real estate is the way to wealth creation, and this is kind of what I'm interested in?
Yeah, so the first thing, one of my good friends going through submarines, he actually dragged me to so he got me to read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then he dragged me to one of those little free seminars on a Friday afternoon where they get you to try to sign up for another 3-day training course or something. And that, there's a lot of sales stuff going on in those seminars, but the premise and everything really got me intrigued. And so I started really looking into it, and started listening to Bigger Pockets, and read those books on real estate investing. And then I also was buying and selling just through the nature of moving so much in the Navy, to where I had the experience of how it works. And, the 6% increase or decrease or commission, we're talking big numbers here and there. So when you're talking about a couple $100,000 house, every percentage point matters. And so I thought that was really cool. And that, to me, was one of those things that it is very much on you to put in the work and the time to build something. No one else is going to really give you a handout and be like, hey, come along with me, unless it's your parents or something.
Right.
You kind of have to go out and seek it. So, I thought it was just really interesting because it kind of fit everything that I wanted. And then also the flexibility to get started. But it's so funny here in Tennessee, I don't know how it is everywhere else, but you just have to take a 2-week class and take a test, and then another 1-week class. You don't even need a high school diploma. You just need a GED. And
by the way, that's more training than most states require. Most states require 8 hours of training and then a test.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go. But yeah, there's essentially nothing. And so it's just the barrier to entry is super low as far as being an agent. And you don't even need that to be an investor. So yeah, it's just really exciting. And, part of it was getting started at a decent time on a couple of the houses that we bought when we moved to Knoxville, and seeing the potential there. That also was okay, this is a reality. So kind of stumbled into a few good deals, by just, the market and the economy. But now it's kind of just blown up, especially Knoxville here. Just been a really thriving market, a really desirable place for people to move to. And COVID just made it boom even more with people being able to work remote and whatnot.
And tell me, as a lifelong Knoxvillian, or whatever you guys call yourself. Yeah. Knoxvillian, really? Oh, sweet. Yeah. Good guess, Scott. You've probably seen that place change in wild, wild ways. So from your earliest memory, maybe how much your parents bought their house for, to now it's a booming kind of a suburb or a second option of Nashville or something. I mean, I got to imagine a lot of people from Nashville and other places, Memphis, who are priced out, they're moving to a place like Knoxville. Where were prices when you were a kid 20, 30 years ago? And where are they now for comparison in that market?
Yeah, so my parents bought a home in 1993, and they still live there. So they didn't teach me much about real estate because they still live in the same house that they that we grew up in.
Hey, buy and hold, man. That's a good lesson.
Yeah, and it was brand new construction. They bought it. It was like I think it was like $95,000 or something, and now it's worth close to like 4.5 or 500. So, um, and most of that, probably half of it has been over the last 3 years, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's the whole city itself is just expanded so much. There used to be like a horse farm that was probably like 50 acres and another cow farm that was 35 acres. And all of those places in the last decade have gotten bought out and are huge, 200 home subdivision now. And there's still a huge housing shortage here. They're popping up apartment complexes everywhere. And so,
And what's
it's just changed so much.
What's the economic driver there? Is it the college? Did Amazon open a regional distribution center there? Do you guys have technology, or because I'm here in Vegas right now, and like obviously Vegas for 70 years, 50 years has been, gaming and tourism, but like they've really made a big push in the last 20 years to have real industry as far as like technology and, infrastructure and supply chain. And like, there's a booming economy here outside of the gaming industry. So what's driving Knoxville, Tennessee and the surrounding area specifically?
Yeah. So the biggest thing would be, the university, the World's Fair was here. In the 90s, and then that kind of put us on the map, and pretty much since then, we did have an Amazon distribution center, but a lot of it has really just been just a desirable place to live. And I know that sounds really weird, but we experience all four seasons, so you kind of get a little bit of everything. There's a bunch of lakes nearby. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is, a short 45-minute drive, which is the most visited national park in the country. Gatlinburg.
Is that where Dollywood is?
Yeah, Dollywood.
Shout out Dolly Parton.
Dolly, yeah, she's awesome. Yeah, I mean, just little things like that. And then there's no income tax here in Tennessee, so that's a huge driver for people to move here, especially when you can work remote and make the same money and just pay less taxes on it. And then the cost of living was also very low, and still is low compared to the average across the country. So.
Nice. And, going into real estate, I know that you're investing in some properties for yourself, but you are also a realtor who helps people buy and sell houses. Coming into what you expected about the industry, what's been like pleasantly surprising, and what's been the biggest like, oh shit, surprise? Like, I don't like this part of the business, versus like what's been pleasantly surprising for you?
So pleasantly surprising is I'm by nature pretty introverted. And so you just have to put yourself out there, and even to like old friends and family. And if no one knows what you do in this industry, like no one's going to come to you for help. So you kind of have to make sure people know what you're doing. But I thought that was going to be really difficult, and I was going to get mixed feedback, but everyone's just been so helpful, and it's been actually a very pleasant experience overall, and just super supportive. And then the oh shit moments are basically when you realize like the first couple deals that you do, you really have no idea, because even the training that you go through is not at all helpful for actual contracts and how to help your client with little things. Is okay, we want all these doorknobs replaced because they're broken, to bigger things like, oh, the seller wants to close but they're not willing to follow their part of the deal. So just the real like severity of it, where it is a binding contract, but a lot of people kind of don't treat it as such, especially the more experienced like builders. Like they'll promise to be done at a certain time and then just keep pushing it back, and
Right.
they're most of the time it's, legitimate reasons because weather or, supply delay, but there's really no consequences to them.
Right.
The buyer can get out of the contract, but if they've been waiting for their house to be built, they kind of have the sunk costs of all that time. So yeah, it's hard because it's just a lot of money and it's a lot of people's biggest purchase that they ever make. So
I do feel that there's a little bit of the like science of the deal, the math, the numbers, the contract, whatnot. But then really at this point, that stuff can be handled by computer systems. I won't even say AI. It's not even that complex. It's a really fancy spreadsheet and document, right? But there is an art of the deal of like keeping it together, keeping people calm, letting them know that at the end of the day, we're buying a house. Like it's okay. Again, the house is not bleeding. So like as somebody who's more introverted and has more of that technical side of the background and more of like a mind towards, electronic engineering, what are you finding as far as like working on the art of the deal and your people skills and stuff?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
What have you found on like your people skills, or maybe what relevant military experience has helped you with the art of the deal instead of like just the science of learning how to figure out the contract?
Yeah. So I would say, dealing with people as like a manager, as an officer in the Navy from all walks of life has actually really helped me understand, like, you have to meet people where they're at in their life. You can't just approach every single client the same because they all have different needs. Some are in a really big rush. Some want to take a whole year just seeing a house every weekend because they're bored or like they don't have anything else to do. And they've chosen you as a person to take them on tours. But I really got to experience that in the Navy, where everyone, they're coming from all walks of life. Some very well off, some had nothing, and you have to realize like all that stuff really matters into who people are today and how they'll respond to the stressful parts of the deals and negotiations, and so really just handling everyone differently with what they need has been a real cool ability that I kind of didn't know I had, but it was basically trained through the Navy, kind of as a side effect of dealing with people from all walks of life. And so that's been really cool. And then as far as the numbers go, it's really cool too, because I get to see the closing disclosures. If they feel comfortable, ask them to send it to me so I can help them. And I've helped a couple people, either, interest is wrong or whatever. And that's more of a very specific lender thing. But a lot of people have no idea what they're even looking at. And a lot of loan officers do not take the time, or lenders don't take the time to explain it. And, especially the younger people I've worked with, just trust everybody that they have their best, the best will for them. And that's not always the case. We're all in it to put food on our own table for our families. So that's been super interesting as well, to see how I can actually help people with the numbers. Because like you said, it's a simple spreadsheet, but I've probably had like a handful of clients that actually run the numbers themselves on anything. So I get to kind of take pride in being able to help walk them through and explain where the numbers are at least coming from.
That's awesome. And, one of the things that is so impressive about the military is that you can take a 19, 20, 22, 23-year-old young man or lady, and you can teach them in a very short time period with training how to operate a $1.5 billion submarine. I was just looking up the cost to build a Los Angeles class submarine, and in 2022 dollars, that would be $1.79 billion with training even the most experienced person on the ship probably has 15 years experience. Doesn't seem like enough, right?
Exactly.
So when you go from like the super distinct quality, exactly memorialized training process of the Navy to like, oh, you're a realtor, go figure it out. Watch some YouTube videos on how to fill out the contract. Where are you supplementing the training, either the sales training, the soft skills, the hard skills? How are you learning to be a top producing realtor?
Yeah, so that, again, it does actually relate in a very strange way. So on a nuclear reactor, on a submarine, every single question you could possibly have is in a book somewhere, is in a manual. And so, to your point, that's the reason why you can train anybody is because you have all the information that you could possibly need. I mean, it's basically a whole library full of books, but it's very organized on how to get that information. And so, a lot of times, if you're trying to learn about the submarine and you're on it trying to get qualified, you ask someone else a question, they just say, "Go look it up." And there's so much value in looking it up yourself. It's kind of a lazy thing at first and you get really frustrated, but after a while you start realizing when you're looking that one little bit of information up that you need to know, you find out all these other really important things along the way as you're digging through the books and you're in the references. And so how that relates to real estate is all of these contracts, like there's so much verbiage in there for very specific reasons. And there are a few like gray areas, but they're just contracts. And, if it's not in the contract, it's not part of the agreement. And so it either needs to be added into it or taken out of, through use of amendments and whatnot. But it is very relatable to where you can kind of teach yourself in that aspect of, well, what does the contract say? And, at first it's, okay, how do we handle the blinds? Is that part of the house? Is that not part of the house? And it's in the contract. So, or if it's not, you got to add it in there. It's just very specific. And that was really cool to kind of be able to teach myself a lot of the things. And now I'm part of a brokerage that has a lot more training and hands-on, and I still kind of prefer to teach myself just because I learned so many other things along the way. Like there's state requirements, and I like to go just look up instead of asking someone, oh, like, do you have to have the brokerage phone number on a business card? It's like, well, let me just go look it up because like there's rules for all this stuff and it's publicly available. So just look it up.
That's awesome, man. I love that. And if you had to give a new agent, top 2 or 3 resources for, again, either the art of the deal or the science of the deal, like what would you recommend to a newer agent or somebody who's looking to get into the business? Like what are some things that you're listening to, some things that you've learned, some YouTube channels you're following, podcasts you're listening to? Like what's been your, training 101 as a realtor?
So a lot of it isn't necessarily real estate related, but just the schedule and the I don't like even calling it motivation, but just the persistence of waking up every day, showing up, and doing your job, being there for your clients, responding quickly. That's more than probably 80 to 90% of realtors out there, because they just either do it part time or they're only do it because they can do it whenever they want. So I would say reading books. So several of the books, Atomic Habits, that's just a really classic example of
amazing
how
book.
Yeah, exactly. But you can apply it to almost anything in your life. But as far as like starting out to do real estate, there's no one there to hold your hand. There's no one there to tell you what to do day by day. So you got to figure it out, and you got to come up with a plan and be persistent in it. And then the other thing is there's only so far that you really can go by yourself. So as far as training goes, and that's what my goals are for this year, surrounding myself with other people who are, top producers or who are doing it better than me, because I want to learn what they're doing, both as a realtor and as an investor, because I have so much to learn. And, hopefully I can share something that I've learned that they haven't along the way. And so just, like to do things a lot myself, but then also realizing to a point that's a fault, and you got to reach out to people who do it way better than you, because there's always going to be someone above you in that regard. And yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for just a couple years, and there are people who've been doing it a couple decades, and I'm close with them, and they've no contracts like the back of their hand. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. I love it. And I always like to wrap up with like the same two questions I asked everybody. We're filming this at the beginning of 2024. What are you most looking forward to in 2024, whether it's personally or professionally or whatnot? And then number two, what's your favorite movie and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'll have to put some thought into the movie one real quick.
And by the way, I have a follow-up question just because of your expertise. Are there any submarine movies that are actually accurate? Like Hunt for Red October, you know, Das Boot, like any submarine movies that are actually good?
No.
Okay, perfect.
I mean, there a lot of them. It's kind of like a space movie or like sci-fi where you could just poke holes in them, but they are entertaining and they're 90%. But since I've lived on a submarine, I'm focusing on the 10% that's wrong, and it kind of ruins it for me. But I try not to ruin it for others.
All right, cool. So, what are you most looking forward to in 2024, and favorite movie and why?
So most looking forward to in 2024, I would definitely have to say just personal development as far as growing as, an investor, a businessman, but also as a father and a husband, and just trying to balance the, all that. 'Cause I got 2 young kids and an amazing wife that I, owe everything to as well. So I'm most looking forward to just being able to provide for the family and becoming the best version of myself through the day-to-day, minute by minute decisions that I'm making, and always having that in the back of my mind as a guide. And favorite movie, man, that's wish I came prepared for this one.
Well, while your subconscious is working on that, I'll give you a resource.
Yeah.
Shout out to my buddy John Vroman. He runs a mastermind group and a free podcast called Front Row Dads, and it's all about fathers who own businesses, not business owners who are trying to be dads. And they address this very thing, right? Like the pillars of like, hey, I'm trying to go through wealth creation, but I'm also trying to show up for my kid. And I'm also trying to be a good husband. And I'm also trying to stay healthy. And I'm also trying to like build my wealth and legacy, right? And so, I think you would really resonate with the topics on Front Row Dads. He's done hundreds of episodes, but even going all the way back to the beginning and starting at the beginning, because he's just had some bangers of an interview over health and like emotional intelligence as a father and balancing being an entrepreneur, and then having to come home stressful when things are good, when things are bad, when things are horrible, and he's a great resource for young dads who are also business owners. So Front Row Dads with John Vroman, you'll have to check it out. Hopefully awesome. I stalled long enough for your subconscious to work on a favorite movie or one of your favorite movies.
Yeah. I was actually so into what you were saying, and just to kind of touch on that, while my subconscious is still thinking about a movie. Yeah, my 3-year-old son, he just turned 3, coming home to him even after like a deal fell through or some like a really stressful time. And he's oblivious to all of this, and he's just happy to see me. And it's like so grounding that I don't want to ever forget that feeling. And so I definitely want to look into that Front Row Dads group and everything. That's such a cool concept that I think we need more of in society, but also personally, I definitely aspire to do that. So,
by the way, the gut punch is coming, because I'll never forget my son. He's about to turn 8, and he was probably about 4 or 5, and we were out at like a sushi dinner, and he was playing with my phone, like not playing on the phone or watching anything, just like playing with the physical thing, like flipping it upside down and whatnot, and like just playing with the phone case. And I looked over, I'm like, hey buddy, like you should probably finish your food there. And he like put his hand up and he put the phone to his ear. He's like, Dad, I'm on a meeting call. And although it was funny in the moment, and we got a good laugh. Like, talk about feeling like a piece of shit as a father, because I was like, well, that's learned behavior. And how many times have I cut off this little boy who's just like looking up to me as his hero because I was on a very important meeting call, you know? And I'm just like, oh man, like lots to work on. And I remember calling my my pod, because I'm in that Front Row Dads mastermind group. I remember calling my pod and be like, hey man, like I just got kicked in the gut and like bowed over by a 5-year-old. And I told the story, and they're like, oh yeah, everybody could relate at some level. So I didn't feel uniquely horrible, but I felt pretty horrible.
Yeah, wow. I can imagine. Yeah, that I'm sure that day's coming. But it's a good gut check too, like you said. But yeah, I think the best I could do for movies, because my family's big into like all the Marvel movies, so I'll have to say Endgame, just for how it ties everything together.
It's epic.
Yeah, for sure. Just one of the ones that'll always be a go-to for us. So.
Did you miss out on like 8 years of like what was in the social zeitgeist, because you were like on a submarine and like serving the country and doing, even when you're on shore leave, it's like, I'm sure you're trying to get in family and stuff. Like there's no time to just like watch The Walking Dead, right?
Yeah. And so two quick, very brief stories. First is, I mean, we basically had to disconnect our Facebook, social media. So I wasn't keeping up with anybody back home. While I was gone and deployed, even at the Naval Academy. So that was a real struggle, moving back and getting back into my sphere that I was working with, because that's the benefit of working where you've lived as a realtor, because you already, have people that know and trust you and your family and all these things. But I had been just completely absent for really 12 years, because it's 8 plus the Naval Academy time. And then the second story was on one of the deployments, we actually were gone during the 2016 presidential election. And I'll never forget, when we went underwater, Hillary Clinton was like basically guaranteed to win. And then, obviously what ended up happening was Trump won. But when they sent us the message and told us who the new commander-in-chief was going to be, everyone thought it was a complete joke because like when we had gone, last we knew in the world, like Hillary Clinton was up by however much she was.
Yeah, she was the heir apparent.
Yeah, and it was all just, media and all these other things. But it was just, that's how oblivious you are to what's going on in the world. And, you just get messages every once in a while to kind of give you a little snapshot. But yeah, that was kind of very... mind-blowing.
That's wild, man. Well, hey,
yeah.
I just want to say thanks for your time being on the show. And I think you add a lot of value to realtors that might be looking at like getting started or just thinking through why they might be in this career. So I appreciate you. I think I made an introduction to Ernest. You guys have already met. He's a wonderful resource for wholesaling and flipping, and we're going to have him on the show soon here. So yeah, man, just want to say thank you. And I appreciate you, and just have a great year, man. Crush it. Family, life, health, business. Like, you're going to do awesome things. I know this because Trier spoke highly of you, so I know you're going to do awesome things.
Hey, thank you so much, Scott. This has been awesome. Thanks for making all the connections you have. And yeah, keep putting out that good word. It's awesome. It's a lot of value in it.
We'll talk to you soon. And, I wouldn't be doing my job as a real estate mortgage coach and as a loan officer. I didn't say, hey, if you get a deal out there that your primary guy can't figure out, save my contact information if you need a backup lender.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do, Scott. Appreciate it.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks.